dollar will be a little bit more concerned, but for the time being, we're okay. On the next chart, you can see what has been driving the Canadian dollar. Primarily, if you look at the correlation over the last little while, the tightest correlation right now is with U.S. equities. So the problem is if you have a view on U.S. equities one way or the other, you have to extrapolate that view to the Canadian dollar. So if people are viewing the world as a better place, they'll buy U.S. equities and they'll buy Canadian dollars. On the other side, if people are out there in the world have a negative view on the world, they're going to be selling U.S. equities and selling the Canadian dollar. Some of the other traditional drivers that you think of with respect to the currency aren't playing as important of a role right now. On the next chart, you can see the impact of oil prices. And traditionally, you think of higher oil prices means a higher Canadian dollar. And this is true up until a point. You can see the relationship that's positive until you get to a price of oil around $100 a barrel. Anything above that, it stops being a source of support for the Canadian economy and is instead a drag. This is because at some point, higher oil prices become a tax on consumers. So the message I would leave you with this chart is that if somebody says, well, if the price of oil goes to $140 a barrel, the Canadian dollar will be well through parity, I wouldn't be so sure. You can see that that relationship does break down. On the next chart, you can see what we're left with for interest rate differentials. Again, nothing really major. Central banks in Canada are basically taking the next year and a half off. In the US, even a little bit longer. So this means, unfortunately, in the intermediate period of time, that the Canadian dollar is going to be more volatile because it's going to be driven primarily by US equities and maybe to a lesser degree, the price of oil. On the next chart, you can see a little bit of a longer-term picture. Let's try and think about something a little bit more generally. Canada is very, very well positioned. We can see that foreign investors in the green line here have shown pretty dramatic interest in Canadian bonds. It's come up a little bit in that green line there, but even at the current level, it's still well above what we've seen in previous years. So what this means is that foreign investors are recognizing Canada not necessarily as a safe haven, but as a good place to invest. It makes sense. Fiscal fundamentals much stronger here. Economic exposure is much better here. We're still tied to the US, but our growing trade relationships to Asia. So I think what this means is that as we look further into the future, the Canadian dollar will continue to appreciate. All we have to do is get through this current period of uncertainty. And if we look out 5, 10 years, I think we'll look back at the Canadian dollar at parity in the same way we look now at the Canadian dollar at 62 cents as a bit of a historical curiosity. So on the next slide, I think we can see that foreign central banks are also looking more closely at Canadian dollars. Again, a bit more of a medium-term theme, but nevertheless, we suggest that over the medium term, the Canadian dollar will be worth more than where it stands today. So on the next slide, you can see basically an attempt to pull everything together. I know it's been a pretty quick session, and I know you're itching for lunch. I'm glad there's no food right next door so you can't smell it, because that would be disastrous for me. So let's try and take some ideas and wrap them up in one simple slide. First observation I think I would make is that we're in a world that we've really never seen what we've seen. We've never seen the degree of economic weakness shared across the United States, across Europe, across Asia to a certain degree. In response, we've never seen the amount of stimulus that policymakers have done and provided. So we really are, unfortunately, flying blind right now. We're trying things, we're not sure exactly how that will work out. I think the product of this is that we're looking at more economic vulnerability. We see that with the earthquake in Japan, that if the U.S. economy was growing at a much higher rate, that would only be a temporary blip. Instead, it was a vote of confidence that we see slowing the world economic activity. So we're looking at shorter business cycles and more economic volatility. And what that will do is that will create more financial market volatility. So now's the environment where you need to consider hedging options for your currency exposure. Now's the environment where you need to be very aware of where your vulnerabilities lie. This is a world of intense volatility, and it's not going away anytime soon. The second point I make is with respect to the US dollar and the Canadian dollar. Again, a lot of good things are going for Canada, but we need to be patient. For the time being, the US is still the most important currency, still the most important economy. And the final point I'll make, and I do try to end every presentation with just a little bit more optimism. Sometimes it's really hard to do. I think today I'm a little bit more comfortable in saying that over the medium term, Canada is exceptionally well positioned. We have the right trade linkages, we're building the right economic linkages, and looking forward, this is our opportunity to diversify our trade and to take more advantage of what we're seeing across the Pacific Ocean. So with that message in mind, I'll more than happy to turn it over to questions if there are any before we adjourn for lunch. Or have I depressed you too much already? All right, thank you very much for your time.
Looked at Luke and he looked at me, but I just want to thank David and his entourage for making the trek to Medicine Hat from Toronto. We certainly appreciate his insight in terms of kind of what lies out there, and maybe give us a little bit of glimmers of our thoughts locally in terms of what we do day in, day out in our business. Thanks for coming out and enjoying Medicine Hat and spending time with us. So, thank you.
How do you follow David Tull, right? Well, with Kent Smith, that's how we do this. We're going to stay a little bit in the money matters until the lunch break. Kent Smith is a wealth planner. He's going to tell you everything that he does, but I'm going to tell you what I know about Kent that you need to know, because a lot of people know him as, the man that makes money grow. But I've known Kent for many years. Actually, when I came in 11 years ago, Kent was one of the first persons that I had met, and he was, at that time, I think, either president of chamber or past president, and he's involved with so many organizations, and then talking about the values that we've talked about this morning. If that's what you focus, he focuses on community values, and that's what his company stands for. He's extremely involved with Minoraki, as well as with the Health Foundation and so many organizations, but he's going to tell you what he's all about, and that's my good friend, Kent Smith.
Thank you, Luke. It's okay, I'll get you guys going. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, thanks, Ricky. Thanks, Luke, for the introduction. We'd be remiss if I didn't thank Luke for organizing all of this when he brought it to my attention. Like most things he brings to my attention, I thought he was crazy. And looks like he's pulled it off. Good-looking group, very successful-looking crowd. So, Luke, well done. Thank you for doing this personally. There's only a few people. Luke might be the only one who have the guts to try to pull this off the first time. So, well done. We will get rolling here. I have the unenviable position of being between you and your lunch. So the good thing is I get to follow the economist, and so it balances out a little bit. Just up the street, there's a store that's got mattresses on sale, and I think you get a zipper put in it. If you're looking for a place to put your money after hearing Tulk speak, you probably want to run up there before they sell out. The smart money would be buying shares in the mattress company before everybody gets up. There's always a way to make money. I just want to find out a little bit about the audience that's here. So lots. First generation businesses. So you're the founder of your business. There'll be lots, right? Great. Second generation. I can't see hands up a little higher. Third. Any fourth? So one third generation business. You'll see where I'm going with this. So you get a book called The Centuries of Success. It's a historical book on some of the most famous family companies, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth generation. Some from Asia. One of the oldest companies in the world is the first family they feature in there. So hopefully you enjoy that. Was there any second generation? Who's second? Simon, you're second? I'll give it to you. And here's a skill testing question for one last book. Cooper's company, quick, first one, most famous thing they would be known for from the Cooper company. Who said Cooperall? No, you don't get to know me. Who said Cooperall first? Back, this is yours, come get it. enthusiastic. Okay, let's get rolling, see if I can make this thing work. Right down there. Okay, I want to talk a little bit today about some unique way to approach business, unique way to approach planning in a business, and family businesses and non-family businesses. It would be a little bit of a change from maybe what Luke set you up. I'm not going to tell you to make money, because I always follow me talk, and there's just no way to do that. So he's just way too smart. So Cooper was actually giving me the ears a little bit earlier, Coopy, as we know him as now. Well, he said, I'm from Toronto, you live Bay Street. My standard line when people comment on clothing is, well, no brains, no personality, you can always dress in this. So let's review the morning. Cooper, personality, personified, tons of personality. Talk, there's the brains. So if you get stuck, you focus on the tie for the next half hour, and we'll get through it. I didn't know they made economists. I didn't know economists could be 12 years old either. How do you be that smart with that many degrees to be that young? Impressive line. Okay, let's face it. Business equals complexity. Of course, business equals complexity, or you wouldn't be. Hence, the success of the summit and the reason to have the summit is that business is tough. Furthermore, if you make some money and you're successful in business, it just makes it even more difficult. It makes it more complex. There's a lot of people think if you have some financial success, life gets simple, life gets easier. Well, it's just exactly the opposite. If you're Bill Gates, I don't think life's really easy for you. Maybe I don't know if he's still the richest guy in the world, but that was counting. But life is not simple, and life just gets more complex. It's a bit of a fallacy out there that if you have financial success, then you have that equals freedom. Well, it's just the opposite. Life becomes more complex, you probably have less freedom in your world. The more wealth you get to the extreme wealth, the super affluent, the Gates of the world, and now you're hiring bodyguards, worried about your children being kidnapped, etc. So, how do you navigate all this? So let's look at family businesses. As I said, I tie into that my question earlier. If key issues facing family businesses today. Most businesses are family businesses, quite frankly. Even if your children, your spouse aren't working in your business, small, medium-sized businesses, the families all play a role in it in some way, shape, or form. Some have the succession in the second, third, and fourth generation. As you'll see, most don't. So as you can see with the slide, from the first, second, and third generation, the amount of success rate is not that great. When Mr. Cooper was talking this morning, well, I was just speaking into my presentation. He comes from a failed family business. I guess he sold it off, so I'm not sure if that's a failure or not. But it would apply to these statistics. They got to the second generation. I asked him this morning, so I was curious, what happened. A myriad of reasons. But one of the things he said, which is pretty common, is his brother didn't want to be there. He said, I was born into this. This is what I chose to do, and it fell trapped. Pretty common theme. Third, fourth generation, very remote, very unlikely to happen. I think we want to try to turn the tides on that. Now, there are good reasons why sometimes it doesn't get to the second, third, and fourth generations. The business gets sold off. There's a guy, Tom Deans, who was in a very successful family business. He absolutely believes you should not try to pass the business on, you should sell it off. And so in that case, that's okay. But a lot of them just, they want to get there, but they don't have the tools to get there. Biggest reason, lack of poor communication. There's a book, Hats Off to You, which I handed out, written by Dowd and Hausner, experts in the field of family business. Top 3 reasons family businesses fail: communication, communication, and communication. Communication will solve most issues. As Luke mentioned, I'm involved with minor hockey, and so this is actually my 13th speech this week, so you think Cooper speaks a lot. I've spoken to 12 groups of parents this week in a formal presentation setting. So somebody asked me if I was nervous about today. I said, no, this is actually a fairly friendly audience compared to what I've been dealing with for the last 3 days. So and it just brings home the point, communication will solve most issues. Unresolved conflict. My idiot brother threw a rocket when I was 12 years old, and I still haven't forgiven him. And he continues on and festers at 40 years old, he's still your idiot brother. Failed leadership. The patriarch and matriarch are not stepping up and are not providing the leadership and for the family to continue moving forward. Sibling conflict or rivalry. There's the brother again. And lack of shared goals. Lack of long-term vision and succession plans. I got a lot to go through, so I'm going to race through this, so buckle up. I don't want to keep you from your food any longer than you need to be kept. 70% of all wealthy families don't make it past the second generation. The wealth is gone. That's a very sad statistic. That's not anything to do with anything Paul was talking about. That's just the money gets spent and doesn't get passed along. And well, so let's define what wealth is. So under $1 million, we would call emerging wealth, and 1 to 3 million is affluent, 3 to 10 is wealthy, 10 plus is high wealth. The super affluent market is $35 million and up. At that level, you can be somewhat ambivalent towards your planning and still be okay. You've got enough money that you'll still get by. The lesser level, certainly 10 and under, that's where some of the planning needs to happen, or you're part of the statistic. So you come to these, Cooper gets you all pumped up, teaches you all these ways to make a bunch of money, and then you hear this, well, what's the point? They're just going to lose it anyways. This is even more alarming. By the end of the third generation, 90% of the families, the wealth is gone. Families lost their wealth. So it's not, the reason for this is not because that the professionals and practitioners are not good at what they do. The lawyers and accountants, you hear something from some great ones this afternoon, are very good at what they do. That's not the reason why we're losing the wealth. The wealth is not continuing on. Traditional planning alone doesn't solve the problem. And I'll get into in the rest of my presentation as to why we think that the success isn't being carried on. So why? When we've analyzed family wealth, and you Google any of this, you'll see just reams of statistics and reams of data to support this stuff. Typically happens for 3 reasons. We've hit on a couple. Again, the first one is communication and trust. Communication. It solves most problems. You've got to talk through. You've got to sit down with the kids. You've got to have conversations. You've got to have family meetings. Anybody here had a formal family business meeting? Yeah. We still facilitate those sometimes. It's amazing that you don't. Meet with your accountant, meet with your lawyers, you meet with clients like me, meet with your bankers, you meet all those kind of things. And the most important people around you don't sit down and have a formal meeting. The failure prepares the responsibility of wealth. The third, fragmented planning advice. In my opinion, from what I've seen in 20 years, that's a distant third. The planning it's not failing because of lack of good planning in the sense of the traditional tax planning, legal planning. I had a client who had the best tax and legal planning money could buy. Everything was locked up. Not a cent was going to the second generation. So that in itself is not the problem. Part of the problem is perspective. Mr. Cooper hit on this. His dad started the company. I forget the term he used. It was a safe haven. It was kind of his comfort zone. It was what he liked to do. One of the sons liked it. One didn't like it at all. The blood, sweat, and tears that goes into building the company. So most of the hands here were first generation. You've got perspective. You live it. You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and cold sweat and wonder how you're going to meet payroll for that week or for that month. You understand dealing with the banks and dealing with the customers and staying late for that extra $10 sale or whatever the case is. You've got that. Your kids, unfortunately, unless you work really, really hard to give it to them, don't have that. How do you give it to them? So you've got to be very purposeful to try to give that to them. And by the third generation, they don't understand it at all. The third generation thinks Disneyland's a spring trip, an annual spring trip, and Disney World's an annual fall trip. They don't understand that Grandpa didn't have enough money to buy bread at one point in his life and all the rest of that. So it's really hard to pass the perspective along. Without the perspective, how do you manage the wealth? Well, it should be fairly simple, right? I mean, we've got great practitioners. It's planning process, pretty simple. You got your objectives, plan, design, and implement. Why doesn't it work? The reason it doesn't work is people get stuck in that plan design phase quite often. Objectives are laid out, plan design don't understand maybe what's going on, and so you get stuck in this internal planning. You implement some things, you don't implement some things, you don't really understand why you're implementing this, you don't implement that, and so you get stuck there, and as a result, this is pretty familiar around my office. People walking in the front door looking like that poor sap. Who wants to talk about this stuff? Let's talk about death, let's talk about taxes, let's talk about the irrevocable separation of you and your money. Well, that's a great conversation. What do you like in your coffee? Cream or sugar or a little whiskey? So this is pretty standard. I'm going to run through these screens fairly quickly so I can get to a little bit of the solution, if there is a solution. People want to try to maintain control, obviously, of their wealth. Again, kids don't understand, they don't get it, how can I give it to them? I had a client who loved telling their story about how they started in business, how they, from their bootstraps up, there's a great story of coming from an immigrant family, etc. But they couldn't pass on to the second generation. They spent 20 years in the company. And so they just, no, they're not ready, they're not ready, they're not ready. Until one day I asked her, tell me the story again. So she loved to tell the story. I said, well, how old were you when you did that? 37, 38 years old. How old is Junior? At least 42. And I just looked at her. And the light bulb went, she goes, I guess he's ready. He's 4 years older than we were. Plus he's had the benefit of learning from you for an entire generation. I think Junior might be ready. But we want to maintain control. We built it. If we haven't done our planning properly, and I give it to Junior, well, that's my retirement he's running around with right now. So instead of being able to be bold and go ahead with some plans, no, that's my retirement. Tons of dilemmas. Me versus the heirs. I give to my kids, but I spend. Like Kupi said, it's either he spends it with his wife, or she spends it with the next guy. So he's doing his best to spend it. The heirs versus charity. How much do the kids get? Is enough enough? What's the name of the Omaha? Somebody help me out with the investor guy. Buffett, thank you. What's the name of the As it's coined the famous phrase, give your kids enough money so they feel like they can do anything, but not so much money that they can do nothing. Well, what's that number? Well, in Medicine Hat, it might be a different number than Toronto, New York, or LA. Again, for a middle-class family, it's a way different number than another class family. You can figure that out. Charity versus me. You also keep it. Heirs versus heirs. Charity versus charity. Which charity do you do? Bill Gates. I would not want to be in his shoes as much fun as it would have been sometimes. He's trying to solve, world issues, cultural issues, societal issues, because he's got that kind of money. That's a lot of pressure. Me versus my spouse. Ooh. Me versus myself, me versus employees. Again, do I take dividend out? Do I add benefits? Do I do this? Do I give my employees a raise? Lots of dilemmas, lots of issues. The planning process can oftentimes be quite complex and overwhelming. There's the advisor explaining something to the client, and the client is, it's kind of like I felt when David was up here actually. What the client thinks is the problem is not always the problem. They come in, I think I need to set up X, Y, Z, I need to do this strategy, I need to do that. When clearly there's a problem, you don't know what you don't know. So the advisor's typical way to do planning is we just blow it full of strategies, just keep shooting strategies at it. And it works for a while, but eventually, again, kind of how I felt like David was talking about in the finance world, you just way too smart. So, I'll just run through these quickly. It's just kind of cute. So the client's a little confused. Typical client reaction. This guy's not taking no for an answer. So, that was that idea. Again, the client still doesn't have any better perspective, doesn't have any better idea what you're talking about. A word I like to use a ton is clarity. Coop talked about that in his presentation. Clarity, clarity, clarity. If you don't have clarity, it doesn't matter how good the idea is. It doesn't mean it's a good or bad idea. You don't have clarity. How can you implement it? If you do implement it, how can you really understand what it's doing? What color is the box? Well, if you look at purple, it could be green, it could be gold, depending on the screen, it might be a little different up there. There's always the professional bias. How do you navigate that in my field? So my accountant thinks this is the answer, the lawyer thinks that's the answer, the insurance guy, the wealth guy thinks this is the answer, the economist thinks that's the answer. So how do you do that? I'm happy to say that the two firms that are speaking this afternoon, we've done a tremendous amount of work with, and whenever we work on a client situation together, it's just a coincidence that we're all speaking here today because none of that was arranged, but I was happy to see who it was. There's a real team approach. And so I got something I can offer, the lawyer's got something to offer, the accountant's got something to offer. So you need to align with professionals. How do we do that? In 10 minutes. So the tremendous, beautiful lunch which looks like this. So there's a movement afoot for the last decade plus amongst planning professionals to approach things a little bit differently. Clearly we want to end up in a different place. Your first few slides showed that the traditional way of doing things it isn't working. The 3% to the fourth generation, fifth generation success clearly isn't working. So if we want to end up in a different place, which I think we do, then we need to start at a different place. Well, where do you start? So we call this the planning horizon, and above and below the planning horizon. Below the planning horizon is the strategies, tactics, and tools. You're going to hear some great strategies, tactics, and tools this afternoon from the other two advisors, professionals that will be speaking. So that's tremendous. You've got to have strategies, tactics, and tools. Above the line, mission, vision, values, and goals. I'm with Coop on this one. What does that crap mean? And so you have lots of companies that do that. What does it mean? And how do you translate that from your business, family business, even your personal life, to your family wealth? There's, in the last 5 or 6 years, there's almost a new industry that started up called family office planning. And that's really, really wealthy. And who basically hire professionals that run a family office for them. And what they do is they look after their finances, look after some of these interpersonal things, look after the kids. They have to start to do some of these things on purpose, because if you don't do them on purpose, it's never going to happen. So we call this the discovery phase. And so the above the line is the discovery. That's not for the advisor, when it's done properly, to discover about you and find out what your situation is, your net worth, and all the rest. It's to help you discover about yourself and your family, called self-discernment. If it's done properly, if you spend enough time in this area, then when you approach the strategies, tactics, and tools below the line, it becomes very clear and evident what you should do, because it aligns with your above the line discovery. Vision and goals for the business. This is where, again, you would use a guy like Kuth, or a guy like Luke, or somebody else who does this coaching stuff to sit down and really identify what is reasonable, what can be articulated, and like Kuth said this morning, you got to be able to measure. Dangers, opportunities, and strengths. We go through that and figure out, again, this is pure business. Financial goals, the resources, and your current advisory team. So just a comment on this. You take a team that has and does bad planning. Bad planning is costly. Put a team together to do bad planning is really costly. And so you've got to do this upfront work to figure out exactly what it is. You've got to take stock of who your current team is. How's the trust quotient? How's their integrity? How's their credibility? How's their professionalism? How's their confidence? And be honest and see where they need to be slotted in. What's your legacy? So, what's your family legacy? Again, Warren Buffett. It's a great phrase. What does it mean? Is it $1 million? Is it $1 billion? I'm going to suggest that Warren Buffett's leaving his kids is probably a lot more. And, in their world, the number is probably a lot bigger than most of us can imagine. But in his world, it's not so much that they feel they can do nothing. The what and the why of planning. Typically, in most planning situations, 80% of the time is spent below the planning horizon. Focus on strategies, focus on tactics, focus on tools, focusing on the products. You need to buy a will, you need to do a trust, you need to do some insurance, you need to buy some RSPs, you need to do some investments, you need to do all of the tools. That's where most of the time is spent. 80% of the time needs to be spent on the what and the why in a systematic way of determining what is your what and why. Once that's defined and articulated in black and white, you can move below the horizon and work on the, okay, do I need this, do I not need that? It's an easy decision as opposed to, do I buy this, do I not buy this? Do I go to this, do I invest in that, do I not invest in that? The below the line is the how. So again, historically, the majority of the time has been spent on the how versus the what and the why. So 5 minutes each? 5 minutes? Thank you. So again, the strategies below the line, all very confusing, all very complicated. You really don't need to understand them if you have a clearly articulated above the line, what and why, below the line, and you just trust your advisors to do them. So it's called the Lacy Wealth Optimization System. And again, this is not a commercial for my firm. This is something you can do. You need to have a systematic way to do it. So your first quadrant, above the line planning horizon, your first quadrant is to get clarity, prioritize, discovery, self-discernment, have those in-depth conversations, drill down deep, exactly what does this mean for my company, for my family, and how does it intertwine whether in first, second, third, or fourth generation. Once that's done, then you move below the line and you look at some solutions, some creative solutions. What is going to solve this? That's where The guys this afternoon will have great creative solutions.